15 years ago, she was once called the angel of the stage, but just as her name was about to shine, she disappeared. No one knew why. No one ever asked again. Until one night, at the most prestigious gala in the world of classical music, where every spotlight favored only the triumphant, she walked in wearing an outdated dress and was invited on stage only to be mocked as a joke. But just minutes later, when her voice filled the room, the entire hall fell silent, and the very person who laughed was the first to bow their head. You won't believe where that voice had been living for the past 15 years, and what made her walk away from the spotlight, to choose a path far greater than fame. Watch until the end, because this ending will make you question your own. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to update our latest videos. Morning sunlight streamed through the small kitchen window of a modest apartment in the southern suburbs of San Francisco. Steam curled from a kettle, releasing the gentle scent of chamomile into the air, mingling with the soft clatter of a cutting board. Amelia Westbrook, 34 years old, her hair neatly tied back and her face bare of makeup, moved briskly as she prepared breakfast and packed a lunchbox for her daughter. She hummed a quiet line from a classical piece, a habit she no longer noticed. The tender melody seemed to drift quietly through the tiny kitchen. "You're singing again," said Sophie, her 12-year-old daughter, entering the room with eyes bright as glass and a teasing tone in her voice. Amelia paused, smiling. "Oops, slipped out again. You know how old habits are." On the kitchen wall hung a few simple family photos, but among them was one that stood out. A framed photo of Amelia in a white evening gown, standing on stage at Lindenhall Conservatory, eyes closed, arms extended, as if pouring her soul into a soaring aria. Back then, she was the pride of the conservatory, the golden nightingale expected to grace the great opera houses of the world. But all those hopes came to a halt in her final year, when her father suffered a stroke and her mother had already long passed. Amelia quietly left the conservatory, left the stage lights behind to become a part-time nurse, a caretaker, and eventually a single mother. No complaints, no headlines. No one in the music world had uttered the name Amelia Westbrook since that day. The morning carried on as usual. After dropping Sophie off at school, Amelia returned to her part-time job at a small bookshop near the harbor. She stocked shelves, managed inventory, and occasionally helped customers find classical music scores. No one knew the woman in the crewneck sweater and canvas shoes had once brought the grand hall of Lindenhall to complete silence with a single note. No one knew. Until one fateful afternoon, a gold-trimmed envelope appeared in her mailbox, bearing the seal of Lindenhall Conservatory, and a single line written in elegant script, "Honorary invitation to the 30th anniversary gala, honoring alumna, Amelia Westbrook." Amelia's hands trembled slightly as she held the thick envelope, its golden trim catching the last light of the afternoon sun. A deep red wax seal bore the raised emblem of Lindenhall Conservatory, the school she once called home, and the place she walked away from. She stood frozen at her doorstep, still as stone for several seconds, as though opening this envelope would awaken the 15 years of silence she had carefully buried. Inside was an elegant card. On the occasion of the 30th anniversary of Lindenhall Conservatory, the Board of Directors cordially invites alumna Amelia Westbrook to attend the honor gala on May 18th at the San Francisco Grand Hall. Your presence would be a great honor to us. Amelia swallowed hard. At the bottom, in handwriting that instantly froze her in place, was a personal note. This year's gala keynote speaker, artistic director Julian Grant. Her fingers tightened around the card. Julian Grant, the name of the man who had once been her rival, who had clawed for the spotlight at all costs. and who had never hidden his disdain when she left the conservatory. "Mom, is something wrong?" Sophie peeked her head out of her room, hair tousled, still holding a colored pencil. Amelia, startled, quickly slipping the envelope behind her back. "Nothing, sweetie, just an old invitation." That night, after Sophie had drifted off to sleep, Amelia sat alone in her small workspace. On the desk, the open letter lay beside a candle burning low. She opened her laptop and slowly typed, "Julian Grant, Linden Hall, Gala." The screen filled with articles and recent photos. Julian was now the artistic director of the San Francisco Grand Ensemble, a celebrated composer and a regular guest on arts programs. Acclaimed, respected. One featured video stood out. Julian Grant speaks at International Music Symposium. Not everyone has the courage to live and die with their art. Some people simply walk away. Amelia's chest tightened. She closed the tab, reached into a worn drawer, pulled out an old leather-bound notebook, its corners frayed with age. The first pages were filled with arias, tidy, delicate penmanship. But near the middle was a piece she had once composed for herself, never performed. The title, "The Voice I Buried." Her fingers tapped gently over the notes, like knocking on the door of a forgotten past. She looked up, back at the invitation. Then she turned to her laptop, opened her email, and began to type. "To Linden Hall. Thank you for the invitation. I will attend." Her hand hovered over the send button. One click, and everything would begin again. A deep breath, a quiet decision. Click. Send. Night fell over San Francisco, quiet and still, under the soft golden glow of lights flickering from high-rise windows. Amelia stood alone in the small attic, a space that held memories she had once been too afraid to reopen. The room was coated in dust, dimly lit by the amber hue of an old desk lamp. In the corner stood a simple wooden trunk, its lock barely holding after all these years. She slowly opened it. Inside were black and white photographs, concert programs, handwritten sheet music with tiny scribbled notes in the margins. And at the very bottom, wrapped in a piece of silver silk, a scroll of music titled, "The Voice I Buried." She gently ran her fingers over the notes as if touching her younger self. A note was written in the margin, written at 3 a.m. after a night watching over Dad in the ICU. "Still hear the melody in my heart." Amelia placed the music on a stand and walked over to the old upright piano in the corner. Her fingers hovered over the keys, then hesitated. How many years had it been since she had last allowed herself to sing? She took a deep breath. Then the piano began. Slow, delicate. The keys led the way for a voice that had stayed silent for 15 years. "Within me, a voice still lingers, wrapped in night, a song yet unsung." The first line pierced straight to the heart. Her voice trembled but never broke, not off key, not forced. Each note carried a piece of memory, her father's embrace after her first solo performance, her mother's eyes watching from the far end of the hall, the dorm room on a freezing winter night where she once sang only for herself. She wept mid-verse, but she didn't stop. She kept singing, with her whole heart. No audience, no spotlight, no Julian, no expectations, just her. And the voice she had buried deep inside for so long. When the song ended, Amelia sat in stillness. The final echo lingered in the room, like a whisper from the past. She whispered, "I never truly gave up music. I only put it away to protect my family." Then she folded the sheet music. This time she wasn't putting it back to rest. This time she was taking it with her. That afternoon, San Francisco wore a shimmering cloak of golden sunset. Sleek limousines lined up in front of the Linden Hall Conservatory, where the 30th anniversary gala was underway. Amelia Westbrook stepped out of a worn-down taxi, no door held open for her, No cameras flashing, no paparazzi. She wore a faded champagne-colored silk dress, subtly mended at one corner, the only formal gown she still owned, a hand-me-down from a friend's wedding. Her brown hair was tied neatly with a fabric ribbon. Her heels were second-hand, bought last year for a nursing interview. She walked up the red carpet, step by step, a figure moving upstream against a current of extravagance. Around her, women draped in Valentino and Chanel, men in sharp Italian tuxedos with diamond-studded collars. Everything sparkled, except her. Who invited her? Oh, Amelia Westbrook. She studied here once but dropped out, didn't she? Thought she was a vocal coach somewhere. Why show up like that? Whispers swirled. Pitying stares laced with disdain swept across her like cold needles. But Amelia only offered a faint smile, the kind born from years of being overlooked, forgotten. A woman paused in front of her, Celeste Monroe, now a famed opera soprano, once a junior student at Lindenhall during Amelia's time. Amelia, is that really you? Celeste raised an eyebrow, eyes flicking from Amelia's hair to her dress to her scuffed shoes. Oh, how bold to go with such a vintage look. Amelia smiled gently. Thank you. I've always believed soul matters more than price tags. Celeste froze for half a beat, then let out a short, clipped laugh. Still the artist with a clever turn of phrase. Amelia simply nodded and stepped aside. She knew walking into this place meant walking back into the world that once hurt her most. But it was also here, on this very campus, that she had once found her voice. Tonight she wasn't here to prove anything. She was here because the song inside her had finally stirred awake. And as the bell rang to signal the start of the evening program, Amelia Westbrook, in her old dress and with fire in her eyes, stepped into the grand Lindenhall hall like a quiet flame amid a room wrapped in glitter. Music floated gently beneath the crystal dome of Lindenhall Conservatory. Champagne sparkled in guests' hands as they strolled through laughter, polite toasts, and names lifted skyward by vibrant classical melodies. Amelia stood quietly beside the alumni photo display, among them one picture of herself at 19, stage lights casting a hopeful glow across her eyes. No one recognized that the girl in the photo was the woman standing before them. Then a voice behind her rang out. I thought I was imagining things, but it really is you, Amelia Westbrook. She turned. Julian Grant, dressed in a razor-sharp tailored tuxedo, champagne flute in hand, approached as if stepping onto a stage crafted just for him. That face, once her fiercest rival, now the artistic director of the San Francisco Grand Ensemble, radiated confidence and command. It's been a long time, Amelia said, steady and composed. Julian tilted his head, wearing a smirk laced with amusement and the slightest touch of malice. I must say, you're one of a kind, showing up to an evening like this in a gown from, what, a decade ago? How nostalgic. Amelia offered a calm smile. I kept it for the memories, not the price. Of course, Julian sipped his drink. People who cling to memories usually don't have much of a musical future left to speak of. The guests nearby turned their heads, pretending not to listen, but clearly tuned in. Celeste Monroe, standing close, let out a quiet chuckle and swirled her glass. Julian continued, his voice smooth like a practiced toast. You know, we organized this gala to honor those who never stopped pursuing the arts, the ones who didn't walk away halfway. No one said it outright, but everyone understood. It was a velvet-coated blade aimed at Amelia's decision years ago to leave Lindenhall and care for her father. Amelia's fingers tightened around her glass. Her expression didn't change, but in her eyes something flickered. Not anger, awakening. I didn't walk away from the arts, she replied, voice soft but unwavering. I just refused to trade my family for applause. Julian smirked, the kind of smile worn by someone who believes he's already won. Noble truly. But a voice doesn't live on memories, Amelia. It rusts if you don't use it. She said nothing more, only met his gaze, calm, strangely resolute. Just then, a voice over the sound system invited guests to proceed into the main concert hall for the evening's official program. Julian raised his glass. Enjoy a lovely, nostalgic evening. Amelia nodded. Thank you, and may you never forget, not every voice needs a stage to survive. She walked away, leaving Julian standing in a golden-lit ballroom. And for a fleeting moment, something unfamiliar flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty. Thunderous applause echoed like rain across the hall of Lindenhall Conservatory, where warm golden lights washed over the polished wooden stage and rows of velvet-red seats filled to capacity. The 30th anniversary celebration began with carefully worded speeches from the board, tributes to successful alumni. But everyone knew who tonight's true star was. When the host solemnly announced, "Please welcome the artistic director of the San Francisco Grand Ensemble, Maestro Julian Grant." The applause erupted, not out of adoration, but from the habitual reverence given to names in the spotlight. Julian strode onto the stage beneath the lights, silvering hair perfectly styled, eyes sharp, and a tightly controlled smile. He began his speech in the smooth, enchanting voice that had won over donors and reporters alike. 30 years ago, we were all dreamers, and today some of us are still here, not because of dreams, but because of merit. The front rows nodded, chuckled politely. Julian continued, his eyes scanning the crowd as if hunting for a fixed target. I want to speak of perseverance, of those who don't surrender to circumstances, who don't veer off course to escape pressure, who don't convince themselves that quitting is a noble form of sacrifice. By now, the entire room understood. This was no generic message. He paused, then his eyes locked onto a specific seat, row 6, where Amelia Westbrook sat. In this audience tonight is someone once hailed as the most promising voice of our class. But then she disappeared, like a song without an ending. Murmurs rippled through the room, faces turned toward Amelia, some with pity, some with intrigue. Julian smiled. But perhaps, tonight after 15 years of silence, she might prove us wrong. He stepped back, extending his hand toward the stage like a seasoned MC. Amelia Westbrook, would you honor us with a song? For your classmates, for the next generation, for the dream you once carried. For a moment, every eye in the auditorium was on her. The invitation, wrapped as an honor, was laced with venom. Everyone could feel it. Julian wasn't expecting a performance. He was hoping for collapse. A few quiet chuckles rippled from the right section. Where Celeste Monroe sat, her lips curling as she whispered, "Hope she still remembers what a note sounds like." Dr. Margaret Holloway, seated beside Amelia, began to rise in protest. But Amelia gently touched her hand, holding her back. Inside her chest, her heart pounded. One choice, one turning point. She stood. Her modest heels tapped softly against the wooden floor as Amelia stepped from her seat and walked toward the stage, as if crossing 15 years of silence and buried dreams. Julian stepped aside, that smug smile still on his lips. "Please, Miss Westbrook." Just a few bars, enough to remind us of the voice once called the echo of a generation. Amelia took the stage. She stood before the grand piano, before a room full of people who once looked down on her, and before the very past that had never quite let her go. Then she took the microphone. Her voice, calm and clear, rang out. "I'll need someone to accompany me on piano." A hush fell over the auditorium. Every eye followed Amelia Westbrook as she stood tall under the blinding spotlight. In front of her stood a gleaming ebony grand piano, beside it a young student pianist. clearly nervous, hands trembling. She turned to him, her voice soft but steady. "Do you know Puccini's Visi d'arte?" He nodded, eyes wide in surprise. Not everyone dared choose that aria, one of the most demanding and emotionally complex pieces in all of opera. Amelia turned back to face the audience, but her gaze found no one. She closed her eyes. 15 years. 15 years with no stage, no audience, no professional training. 15 years earning a nurse's wage, changing her father's sheets, singing her daughter to sleep with nameless lullabies. But in the darkness behind her lashes, the old rhythm still pulsed. The voice had never left. The first note rang out. Under the glittering crystal domes of Lindenhall Conservatory's grand hall, a single sound rose, soft like a whisper, then expanding outward like waves, filling the space. Her voice, Amelia's voice, deep, full, aching, drifted through the room like smoke through the cracks of the human heart. Visi d'arte, visi d'amore. I lived for art. I lived for love. No one moved. Celeste Munro, who had snickered just minutes ago, slowly lowered her wine glass. Julian Grant, seated in the front row for the first time that evening, lost his smug composure. His hand resting on his knee, clenched slightly, involuntarily. The eyes of those who once dismissed her now hesitated. Phones slipped from hands into laps, forgotten. Amelia wasn't performing. She wasn't showcasing technique. She sang with a heart that had endured, loved, lost, and given everything. In every soaring note were the breaths of sleepless nights. In each legato phrase, the quiet footsteps through life's harsh winters. And in the final line, "Perché, signore, perché me ne rimuneri così?" Why, Lord, why do you repay me this way? Lived every moment she had stared into a mirror and asked, if I hadn't walked away, where would I be now? The last note faded, gentle, like a butterfly landing on a trembling palm. Amelia opened her eyes. She couldn't see the audience clearly. The lights still blazed hot and bright. But one thing was unmistakable. No one spoke. No one clapped. Not a sound. Only the sound of hearts pounding, not her own, but of everyone seated in that hall. One beat, two beats. Then, from the far left, Dr. Margaret Holloway shot to her feet, hands trembling, clapping loud. Then another, then the entire hall, rising as one. A standing ovation. Applause roared, not for fame, not for formality, but because they had just witnessed something truly extraordinary. A woman, once cast aside, had walked onto that stage with a naked, defiant heart and silenced the world. Amelia stood there. She didn't bow, she didn't smile. She simply inhaled deeply, and for the first time in 15 years, she felt wholly herself. The entire auditorium remained standing. Applause thundered beneath the glass dome of the Lindenhall Conservatory, rolling out like a storm. No one sat down. No one spoke. Every eye remained fixed on the stage, where Amelia Westbrook stood in the spotlight, a living monument to perseverance and unfiltered beauty. Dr. Margaret Holloway had tears in her eyes, her hands clapping non-stop, lips murmuring something, perhaps a prayer. She had once mentored Amelia, and now, standing amidst a roaring ovation, she knew she was witnessing a moment of destiny. A voice reborn, not just to music, but to life itself. The elites, the very ones who had stared coldly at Amelia in her faded dress, now leaned toward the stage. They whispered to each other with wide eyes, in awe, in shame. And then, without needing to be told, they clapped louder. Julian Grant, still seated in the front row, had not yet risen. His hand hovered mid-air above his knee. His eyes, wide open, had lost all their usual arrogance. He looked up at the stage as if seeing something beyond reason. He, the man who once symbolized the pinnacle of prestige, now seemed small before a woman once dismissed as outdated. No one laughed anymore. No more pitying glances. No more murmured, "What a shame." Only one truth remained, glaring and undeniable. Amelia Westbrook had never faded. She had simply gone quiet. And today she returned, not with vengeance, but with life itself. When the applause stretched past 2 minutes, the event host stepped onto the stage, eyes glassy, voice cracking. "Ladies and gentlemen, I don't believe there's anything left to say. She has said it all." With her voice. A young woman in the audience began to cry. Then the man beside her. Couples reached for each other's hands. An elderly conductor quietly wiped his glasses. From the wings, Celeste Munro emerged, still dressed in her dazzling gown, yet stripped of any spotlight that could rival what had just occurred. She approached Amelia, gently embraced her and whispered, "I thought I understood music. But today, I just want to say I'm sorry." Amelia didn't reply. She simply nodded softly, her eyes misty, but her gaze clear. Down below the stage, Sophie Westbrook, Amelia's daughter, stood beside Daniel, a close family friend, eyes gleaming with pride. "I told you, my mom sings like an angel," Sophie whispered. Daniel gently squeezed the girl's shoulder. "She always has. The world's just now catching up." For the first time since the aria ended, Amelia bowed her head, not out of courtesy, but as a thank you, not for the ovation, but for the girl inside her, the one who once sang through the nights while caring for her sick father in a cramped bedroom in 15 years of silence, and never gave up. As the applause slowly faded, the air in the hall remained thick with emotion, as if everyone knew something had just happened, something they couldn't quite name. The stage lights dimmed, leaving only a warm golden glow upon Amelia Westbrook's eyes, still standing motionless in the center. Once again, she didn't need words. And in that moment, Julian Grant stood up. Not because he was prompted, not out of social decorum, but because something within him shifted. He walked, slowly, deliberately, each step weighed down by the past. When he neared Amelia on the stage, the entire hall held its breath. No more whispers, no more camera flashes. Just one man, once convinced he stood at the summit, now face to face with the woman he had long dismissed as a forgotten chapter. Julian stopped a single step away. His eyes were red, his chin trembled. And then he bowed. No words, no excuses, just a bow, filled with respect, with lateness, and with regret. Amelia looked at him, the same clear, unwavering gaze, not vengeful, not proud, only the understanding of someone who had walked through loss and returned, not to conquer, but to reclaim herself. Julian looked up, exhaling softly, as if releasing a knot that had bound his heart for decades. He stepped back, extended a hand. "Amelia," his voice rasped, "I was wrong." She looked at that hand. She didn't take it. She didn't avoid it. She simply smiled, gently, and replied, "No one owes anyone an apology. When time has already taught us everything." Julian stood still, then nodded, not as a rival, not as an artistic director, not as a public figure, but as a listener, humbled, grateful, and aware he had just witnessed something that transcended music. After the curtain had fallen and the lights had dimmed, many guests began to leave in silence, not from boredom or disappointment, but because each of them carried something unnamed in their hearts. Amelia Westbrook stood quietly in the reception hall beside Dr. Margaret Holloway. A few attendees came over to shake hands, offer congratulations, even ask for autographs. But gradually the crowd thinned. And then Julian Grant returned. He had changed jackets, buttoned his collar, as if trying to cover the rawness exposed on stage just moments earlier. But his eyes still hadn't settled. He approached holding a navy blue folder embossed with the emblem of the San Francisco Grand Ensemble. "I don't know how else to say this," Julian began, slow and deliberate, "but I want to invite you back. Back to the stage. Back to the world that should have been yours." Amelia tilted her head slightly. No surprise, no flinch. Julian opened the folder, revealing a refined invitation printed on heavy stock. "We're organizing a full concert featuring voices that have redefined music." And Amelia, "Tonight you did just that. You don't have to sign anything now, but I hope you'll consider it." Amelia looked at the invitation, the words blurred as a tide of emotion welled in her chest. She remembered the years she'd rushed home from the practice room because her father was fading day by day. She remembered the sparkle in her daughter Sophie's eyes as she sang lullabies in the dim light. She remembered teaching a neighborhood child to keep rhythm, not on a grand stage, but in a cramped room with water stains on the ceiling. Gently, Amelia slid the invitation back toward Julian. "I'm honored, truly I am. But I don't need a grand stage to be myself." Julian froze for a beat, then slowly folded the folder closed. His eyes no longer carried the intensity of a talent director, but the quiet depth of someone who had learned to listen. Amelia continued, "I used to think music was about proving something, but now I know. It's about giving, and I've already chosen where I'm meant to give." Julian offered a faint, humbled smile, the kind a man wears when he finally understands. Some dreams don't need spotlight to come true. After the gala, Amelia quietly left Lindenhall Conservatory as the night had fully descended. No more stage lights, no more scrutinizing stares, just her and the calm she hadn't felt in years. As she walked toward the parking lot, a voice called from behind, "Ms. Westbrook." Amelia turned. A young woman in her late 20s, hair tied neatly, round glasses framing bright eyes, was walking toward her. "I'm Gabrielle Lynn, your former student, from the community vocal class at Eastbrook." Amelia squinted slightly, then recognition lit her face. The skinny girl who always sat in the back, hesitant to raise her hand, was now a confident, composed young woman. Gabrielle's voice trembled slightly with emotion. "Back then, you were the first person who made me believe my voice had worth. You didn't just teach me music, you taught me self-respect." Amelia smiled warmly, her expression softening. "Thank you. So what do you do now?" Gabrielle handed her a small business card. The printed text read, "Aurora School of Music, Director of Community Programs. We're looking for a part-time mentor for students with limited access to music education. These kids don't have formal training, but they have heart. They don't need a star, just someone who listens, someone who can guide." Amelia gently squeezed the card between her fingers. A quiet stir echoed in her chest. Gabrielle added with a smile, "I believe you're the only one who can do that, not for prestige, but because you truly love music." Amelia glanced toward her car, where Sophie sat waiting, chin resting on her hand, eyes sparkling behind the windshield. She turned back to Gabrielle and nodded without hesitation. "Send me the schedule. I'll be there." As Gabrielle walked away, Amelia remained standing for a moment longer, not because she was unsure, but because something deep inside her had just awakened. That voice was never meant to be hers alone. It had simply been waiting for the right place, to come home. 3 weeks later, the old wooden sign outside a weathered building in suburban San Francisco had been replaced. Freshly painted letters, soft yet proud, shimmered in the afternoon sunlight. "Vocal Class, Instructor Amelia Westbrook, Aurora School of Music." Room 12B, inside the classroom, plastic chairs formed a half circle. The whiteboard still bore faint streaks from its last erasing, and a row of windows opened slightly to let in the ocean breeze from the bay. Amelia stepped in, a music folder in hand, her hair neatly tied up, dressed in a simple navy blue dress. In her eyes, there was no trace of the hesitation once born from a retreat from the spotlight, only poise and a passion for her craft that had never dimmed. "Hello, everyone," she spoke, softly, but it echoed with confidence. Curious eyes, of every shade and circumstance, lifted toward the woman standing before them. There was a scrawny high school student, a single mother with sweat-matted hair, a young man in worn-out sneakers, but with strikingly bright eyes. Here, you don't need fame. You don't need perfect technique. You only need one thing: a heart that truly wants to sing. She turned to the board and wrote, "Music does not judge. Music heals." The first class began with simple vocal warm-ups. One by one, voices, unpolished, trembling, rose and blended together like broken pieces, slowly learning how to belong again. Amelia didn't teach from theory books. She told stories about the nights she sang her father to sleep in a hospital ward, about an aria that sat in silence for 15 years, about what it felt like to stand in front of a grand gala crowd and still only think of her daughter asleep at home. Every session she listened without interrupting, and when needed, she sang, not to impress, but to guide. One Friday afternoon, Sophie, her daughter, peeked into the room. The girl stood quietly at the door, watching her mother show a student how to play the piano in tempo. "Mom, you look like one of those teachers in the movies," Sophie whispered as they walked home. Amelia smiled. "No, sweetheart. I'm just someone who finally found her old dream again." It was just another ordinary Wednesday afternoon. Amelia was guiding a group of students as they rehearsed for an upcoming in-house performance at the Aurora School of Music. Her hair was neatly tied back, and around her neck was a pale pink silk scarf, a birthday gift lovingly handmade by Sophie. No makeup, no stage lights, only natural sunlight streaming through the classroom windows, casting soft beams over music notes scribbled across the whiteboard. "Let's try the last part again," Amelia said gently. "Take a deep breath. And don't sing with your throat. Sing with your memories." In the corner of the room, a parent waiting for her child idly opened her phone and began recording. Just a few dozen seconds. A casual clip no one thought would change anything. But in that short clip was a raw, unfiltered voice. No microphone, no reverb. Just Amelia Westbrook's rich mezzo tone, calmly demonstrating a phrase from Handel's Ombra mai fu as she coached a student. The voice didn't flaunt technique, but lingered in the air like a distant whisper from somewhere deep within the soul. The parent uploaded the clip to TikTok, adding a simple caption, "My kid's vocal teacher, who knew she once walked away from the big stage just to teach kids like ours." 48 hours later, the video had 2.3 million views. The comments section erupted. "I cried listening to her. Does anyone know who this woman is? That voice sounds like it stepped out of a fairy tale. If this is the woman who left the stage, then the world left behind a genius." The music blog Vocal Spotlight quickly picked up the story. A journalist, once a Lindenhall student himself, recognized the voice. "This is Amelia Westbrook, the woman who once turned down a full-ride scholarship to care for her ailing father." The song had been sung, and this time the world was no longer ignoring it. Reporters began flooding Aurora School of Music with calls. Local news crews made their way to the small classroom tucked inside a working-class neighborhood, all seeking to meet the teacher whose voice silenced the internet. But Amelia said nothing. She kept teaching as usual. Occasionally, she smiled when a student finally held a difficult note steady. One afternoon, as class ended, Sophie ran up and wrapped her arms around her mother. "Mom, you're famous now. Everyone at school says you're an angel in disguise." Amelia brushed her daughter's hair gently and whispered, "If I'm an angel, then you're the reason I learned how to fly again." The auditorium stage at Roosevelt High School glowed under the warmth of golden lights. Banners reading "Congratulations, Class of 2025" hung suspended against a navy backdrop, with clusters of balloons shimmering like unspoken dreams. Amelia sat in the third row, clutching a simple bouquet of hydrangeas wrapped in brown paper. Today was the day Sophie, her daughter, once learning to pronounce words by mimicking classical music, officially graduated high school. No one recognized the single mother in the grey dress as the voice that once silenced an elite concert hall. To everyone here, she was just Ms. Westbrook, the strangely gifted vocal teacher. On stage, the principal read out student names, one by one, handshakes, flashes from phone cameras, rhythmic applause. Then suddenly, the principal's tone shifted. Before we conclude today's ceremony, we have one final surprise, not listed in the official program. Amelia furrowed her brows slightly. One of our graduates, Sophie Westbrook, along with a group of her classmates, has secretly prepared a gift. A gift for her mother. And not just any mother, but a teacher. A woman who reignited a flame many believed had long gone out. A murmur rippled through the auditorium. Amelia looked up. On stage, Sophie emerged in a simple white dress, holding a microphone. Behind her stood a group of Amelia's students, familiar faces she had once taught, note by note. The music began. It was Ombra Mai Fu, the same aria Amelia had sung at the Lindenhall Gala. But this time, it wasn't Amelia's voice. It was Sophie's, youthful, unpolished, but brimming with feeling. Every note carried a quiet gratitude for the mother who had stepped away from glory, but passed on the strength to let her daughter take that same stage. As the final note faded, the entire hall rose to their feet. No one spoke. Many wiped tears from their cheeks, and Amelia, hands trembling around her bouquet, could no longer hold back her own. The principal returned, smiling warmly. "Ms. Westbrook, we'd like to invite you on stage. There's one more gift." Amelia hesitated, stunned, then stepped up. On the large screen behind her, words appeared. Turner Vocal Scholarship. Founded by the San Francisco Community Scholarship Fund and San Francisco Grand Ensemble. For students at the Aurora School of Music pursuing a professional path in vocal arts. A voice never disappears, it simply waits for someone to rediscover it. Amelia stood speechless, her voice caught as she pulled Sophie into a tight embrace. "Are you proud of me?" Sophie whispered. Amelia replied, voice hoarse, "No, I'm grateful. Because of you, I now know my music was never silent. It was simply waiting to rise again, with a new generation." On the rooftop of the Aurora Music Center, once a crumbling warehouse, now transformed into an open art space, Amelia Westbrook stood still in the evening breeze. The golden sunset painted the San Francisco sky, the last rays of light shimmering across the waters of the bay in the distance. Beside her stood Sophie, now a freshman at the Berklee College of Music. Her hair danced gently in the wind, and in her hand was a small voice recorder, the same one her mother had used years ago. "I never asked you," Sophie said softly. "Did you ever regret leaving Lindenhall?" Amelia was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, her eyes gazing toward the horizon. "I used to, but not because I chose family over the stage. I regretted letting my voice go quiet for too long. But now I know. It was never gone." Sophie placed the old microphone in her mother's hand, the very one Amelia had used during that fateful gala performance. No audience, no stage lights, just the wind, the sun, and a city quietly listening. Amelia gave a small nod. She walked to the edge of the rooftop, where the sun was dipping behind the city skyline. And then she sang, not a famous aria, not a piece from any textbook, but a melody she had once written for her father when he lay sick in bed. A simple tune, yet overflowing with love. Her voice rose into the evening air, deep, strong, unbound. Each note carried on the breeze, floated down city streets, slipped through windows, and lit up hearts that had long forgotten their childhood dreams. As the final note faded, Sophie quietly pressed the voice recorder. It's recorded, so that one day, if I ever forget why I love music, I'll have this to remind me. Amelia gently squeezed her daughter's hand. And when you sing, remember, you don't need the world's approval. You only need to know that the voice is real. The evening wind swept by, carrying the echoes of someone who had once lost herself and had now found her way back, not in the spotlight, but in the hearts she had touched. The story did not end with a standing ovation. It ended with a voice, full, quiet, but resonating forever. Not everyone who steps away from the spotlight does so out of weakness. Not everyone who lives quietly does so because they have nothing to say. Amelia Westbrook was once a vocal prodigy, but instead of chasing fame, she chose to stay by her father's side. Instead of singing on grand stages, she sang lullabies in a small kitchen for her daughter. And for a time, the world forgot she existed. But the miracle is, a true voice doesn't need recognition to survive. It lives through love, through memory, through quiet, courageous choices. Amelia's story isn't about a comeback to prove anything. It's about the rebirth of a part of her soul, a part that had been resting but never silenced. And in that moment when she sang, not for an audience, not for applause, but for herself, and for every heart that had once gone quiet like hers. That was when her voice touched eternity. If you've ever walked away from something you loved, if you've ever doubted your inner voice, remember this: it's never too late to sing your truth. We invite you to share in the comments. What dream did you once leave behind? Or simply type number I still sing if you're still searching for your true voice. And don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep sharing stories that stir the soul, about people who may seem to have stepped back, but are in truth standing fully in their own light.